Right. Hey, tack för att jag fick komma. And for those of you not fluent in Swedish, hello, and thank you for having me. With all the restrictions we currently have on travel, and after a year without a trip abroad, it feels quite exciting to be part of this event and taste a little bit of Sweden from my own back garden here in England. There are some fantastic speakers and panelists today, and it's a real honour to share the opening keynote slot with Tanja Rasmusson, and how interesting it was to speak to Tanja a few weeks ago and find out that the challenges of recruiting and, more importantly, retaining women in construction are not unique to the UK. Now, the World Economic Forum states that gender parity has a fundamental bearing on whether or not economies and societies thrive. Developing and deploying one half of the world's available talent has a huge bearing on the growth, competitiveness, and future readiness of economies and businesses worldwide. In its Global Gender Gap Report for 2020, Sweden was at number 4, whilst the UK was at number 21. With, I don't have enough fingers for 21, with countries such as Latvia, Namibia, and Albania ahead of us. With 153 countries in total on the list, that's still not bad. And I like to look at that as having huge potential to close that gap. We can make a big difference to our economy, our sector, and our individual businesses. And of course, to the women and men who feel the direct impact of the inequality, which in reality serves nobody well. It is worth noting that no country has achieved full gender parity. And a little bit of me says, come on, surely we can do this. The optimist within me hopes for it within my lifetime, or at least that of my daughters. The data suggests more like 175 years, unfortunately, but I hope in some small way I contribute towards accelerating that. So why do I say gender equality serves nobody well? We know that companies with women in senior leadership roles are better innovators. They are more respected in their field, and perhaps the boom moment, they're more profitable. FTSE 350 companies, which have executive committees with female membership of more than 33%, have a net profit margin over 10 times greater than those companies with no women at this level. So lots of numbers. What does that actually mean? Companies with no women on their executive committees have a net profit margin of 1.5%. The margin often quoted as an average in the construction sector, whereas those with more than 1/3 of their committees at this level being female reach an impressive 15.2% net profit margin. So with evidence such as this, and many businesses publicly stating they want more women in their organisations, the question we should be asking is just what is it we need to do to make the difference and realise that increased margin, which across the UK economy equates to £47 billion. I know, what's not to like? The lack of women in construction has been discussed for many years and a wide range of initiatives introduced. Yet despite all the hard work, the effort and the passion, the dial has not shifted much in 20 years. There are amazing women working in all areas of our industry that can more than hold their own, but there are nowhere near enough of them at any level. To close that gender gap and achieve those benefits, we need a healthy pipeline of female talent running right through our industry and our organisations. We know that we all want it, yet the construction sector has one of the largest gender pay gaps and women are still a rarity. We need to stop shouting louder at women and other underrepresented groups to join us. We have to address the underlying reasons why women make up just 14%, 1% to 2% of operational roles of the construction industry's workforce. We need to make construction a viable career choice for as many people as possible, recognising that a lack of flexibility and agility in the way we work actively prevents many from joining us or staying with us. Now, I'm a member of the Women's Business Council alongside my counterpart Rick Lee of Wilmot Dixon, a well-known construction company in the UK, and also in my role as Chief Executive of Build UK. I've focused on a number of issues. I've only got time to cover 2 of them this morning. First, the quick win. For women to feel comfortable, confident, and safe in the workplace, they need to have the right clothing and equipment. I continue to be shocked by reports published in 2021 that still say women are not provided with clothing that fits them properly. Trousers that don't stay up, jackets with too long sleeves, gloves that are too big and don't allow them to do their job properly. In a job where we say safety is the highest priority, we provide equipment that hinders and puts women at risk. Really? Please don't think this is a small thing. In the last 2 reports I read, unsuitable, ill-fitting work clothing that made women feel self-conscious, uncomfortable and unsafe was one of the reasons given for leaving their jobs. Every single company should walk away from today's event and make sure this is not an issue in their business. Can the women in your organisation order the right sized personal protective equipment in exactly the same way the men can? No more, this'll have to do, you are a bit awkward, gosh, haven't you got small feet? It's a special order, no excuses, sort it today. And the second issue, women still fulfil the majority of caring responsibilities outside of work and the majority of domestic chores. If my husband is listening, I must confess that's not quite true in the Nichol household. But in any family, children need picking up from school, parents, grandparents and others need assistance during the working day. So some form of flexibility is vital if we want a greater number of people working. Now, Build UK partnered with an organisation called Timewise, and we have been piloting flexible working in frontline construction roles. Doing that in the middle of a global pandemic was quite a challenge, but it did have its advantages. Almost overnight, people changed their views of working from home, flexible hours and agile working. Everyone got it. There was a different way of doing things. And I don't know about you, but it sometimes feels like we've been through a massive social experiment. Our pilot demonstrated that not only is flexible working possible for frontline operational roles in construction, but that it is positively beneficial. We saw supervisors and managers who said it couldn't be done, citing the complexity of supply chains, programs, locations, traditional way of working in our industry, change their view and become champions of flexible working. I can't say there's just one way of working more flexibly, or that it is easy. It takes planning, it takes time and effort, but the rewards for everyone are well worth it. The benefits to both women and men who feel more in control of their situation with a better work-life balance, increased well-being, better mental health, they're overwhelming. And all of the projects remained on programme and on budget, with some reporting increased productivity, which is something we all want to see. The full report of the project will be published on the 23rd of June. And for any company that really does want to shift the dial, I would urge them to read it. If you want more women in the pipeline to stay in your business and provide that much needed diversity of thought, you need to say yes to exploring flexible working arrangements and fast forward to the more productive and profitable industry we all want to see. Ultimately, we are at a key point for businesses in construction, and you have to decide. If we want to convert the talk about more diversity and greater equality into a reality, then those in the industry have to change the way they operate. I'm a passionate believer that the only behaviours you can change are your own. If you want others to do something different, you have to change what you do. Anyone with a toddler or a teenager will tell you that. This is about individual and corporate action. It's a choice about your future direction and an investment decision for the long term. Every single CEO who looks around the boardroom table to see 9 out of 10 male faces staring back needs to ask themselves, what are they doing to make their business one in which their daughter or granddaughter can get on in? It's up to you to determine what happens now. Thank you so much for listening, and I do hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon. And I think I'm handing back to you, Monica.
Yes, thank you very much, Suzannah. Our keynote speaker is Tanja Rasmusson, Policy Director of the Swedish Construction Federation, DIT. She has extensive experience from the Swedish political arena as part of the Ministries for Justice, Defense, Foreign Affairs, and the Swedish Board of Trade. Tanja believes that gender equality is simply smart business and has kindly accepted to share her insights with us today. Tanja, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. And a million thanks to Suzannah for kicking this off in such a fantastic manner. I am completely inspired. And I just want to take one word with me, or one phrase: sort it now. My job here today then is to make the case for women in construction from our perspective, Byggföretagen. My organization represents the construction industry interests in Sweden. We are a trade association for private construction companies and employers, representing around 3,700 of the 100,000 companies in Sweden. So rather small, but very feisty. We're on a journey. Since the first version of our organization was founded in the late 19th century, we've changed our name several times, from Byggentreprenörerna, the construction entrepreneurs, roughly, to Sveriges Byggindustrier, Swedish construction industry, and lastly, in 2020, to Byggföretagen, which simply is the construction companies. It makes more sense in Swedish, I know, but bear with me. Like any other organization, we have to change, or rather adapt, because the world around us is changing, and business that doesn't keep up will fail. It's pretty simple. Now, we've changed our name to reflect what our members do and what they stand for. We organize construction companies. They build, they erect buildings, they lay rails, they construct bridges, ports, and airfields. But as an organization, we like to see the bigger picture, the overall contribution of our businesses to Swedish society. Because when we build, it's not only buildings, it's homes, it's schools and hospitals, workplaces, recreational areas, and it's the roads that take us where we need to go. So we are more than just the sum of what we do. We are an integral part of constructing Swedish community. And that means we have to reflect the community. Now, we decided to change our name to Byggföretagen to reflect that we are not just this huge concrete industry. Our members, sure, are some of the largest construction companies in Sweden, but many of which also operate in many countries outside of our country. But the majority of our members are SMEs, small companies with a handful of employees, often founded many years ago by proud builders with two hands and a dream, and then passed on to their children, mostly their sons, because it still is a male-dominated business. In total, our business employs around 360,000 people around the country. Not even 10% of these are women. And that is after an increase of more than 50% during the last decade. So what? Well, I'd say there are a few good arguments why we should care about this. First, as I said at the beginning, our companies should reflect the society we aim to build. Half of the Swedish population are women, so there is reason for us to represent them as well. Second, we need to maintain capacity. The skills shortage in our business is well known. Capacity is threatened by the large wave of retirements at the same time as demand is on the increase. We need to convince more people to apply to the industry's training programs. Increasing diversity in the construction industry is an important part of this work. We need an inclusive construction industry that welcomes employees of different genders and ethnic backgrounds. We need to attract 100% of the recruitment base, not half of it. Third, we need to continue adapting to the changes in society, not least when it comes to technology and innovation. Our members need to work more digitalized, to become more industrialized, to stay competitive. To date, 45% of students of engineering at master's level in Sweden are women, and we want to attract the best and the brightest so we can develop this industry. That means we need to actively attract and recruit women, because anything else would simply be bad business. The question we need to answer is, how do we attract women to our industry? We're male-dominated. There is still a strong macho culture in many places. There are so many unacceptable examples of sexual innuendo, full-on harassment, a general lack of respect, and an unwillingness to treat female constructors as real builders. It follows, as Suzannah mentioned, that the physical workplace isn't suited to treat to women. No toilets for women, no private places to get changed, or the equipment is adapted to males only. So why the hell would women want to work for us? Well, to be humble, our industry is the gateway to the future. We build community. Sweden will soon have 11 million inhabitants, and these will need homes, workplaces, schools, and roads connecting them. Our industry will build these. We contribute with over 40 billion krona in tax revenue every year, which is a large chunk of the Swedish welfare system. Our industry is also an integral part of fulfilling the UN Global Development Goals by implementing the roadmap for a climate neutral construction sector by 2045. One could say we build Sweden better. For anyone wanting to contribute to all this, our member companies are pretty fantastic employers. But we need to do more than talk to attract women to construction. Byggföretagen, my organization, runs recruitment campaigns specifically aimed at young women. These campaigns are carried out in targeted channels on social media. We also hold network meetings at both national and regional level. We're very active in our communication with providers of vocational training at all levels, striving for more seats around the country and a modernized construction program at high school level. In all our communication, a sound representation of women and men is ensured. A lot of important work, obviously, is being done day to day by our amazing member companies. Some of our larger companies have implemented apprentice programs, especially for women. House builder Ikon Bostad connected to the IKEA group were the first to offer women-only apprenticeships in carpentry. They have been followed by other companies such as multinational contractor Skanska and local residential developer JM. Many of our larger companies lead by example with highly developed diversity strategies and a high share of women on staff. And that is the most important thing, to lead by example, to walk the talk. Our CEO is called Kathis. Our board director is called Karin. We are women leading this organization together with all the women out there working in different parts of the construction industry, but we need to become even more numerous. A good way to attract young women to any male-dominated industry is to present others already working there. And to that end, we have instituted an annual reward, the Construction Woman of the Year Award, to highlight good examples of women within the industry who go the extra mile and act as role models to others. This year, the title was awarded to Emma-Lena Andersson, sheet metal worker and construction manager. She works actively to improve the construction sector as a good workplace for all by addressing important issues such as psychosocial health, harassment, and bullying in the workplace. She's also engaged in increasing the number of women and girls who want to work, to learn more about, and to join the construction industry. To quote our CEO, Emma-Lena's strong commitment to creating a workplace environment where everyone feels welcome and at home and feels that they can thrive and develop makes her an inspirational role within the construction industry. Emma-Lena herself, when presented with this award, said that we need the knowledge and experience from everyone, both sexes and all cultures, to build a society for everyone. And she pretty much sums up everything I wanted to say in this address. So thank you, Emma-Lena, for being here for all of us. Our work is slowly rendering results. Just last week, we received notice that the number of women applying to Nakademin, one of the private providers of vocational higher education in construction, has risen by 20% since last year. That puts the number of women aiming for a job as a construction manager in this particular provider to between 30 to 50%, depending on the program. One of the underlying factors behind this success is active engagement from the Swedish enterprise, our unions, and member organizations such as my own. And this makes me very proud. Proud doesn't mean content or complacent. However, the work has to continue, probably for a long time. Our goal is really for this kind of event to be deemed unnecessary the day women and men have equal opportunities and equal access to our industry as all industries. But we have gotten off to a good start, and that is something. So with that, I'll leave back to you, Monica. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tanja. And we will now get into the Q&A session. If you haven't written your questions in the chat, feel free to do that. But we already have a couple of questions. So the first one, don't you think that we need to award companies that pay women equally and give them opportunities for progression? Suzannah, Tanja, whichever wants to go for this question. Suzannah, maybe you?
I appeared first on screen, so shall I go first? We need to reward companies for doing what is a legal requirement. It's an interesting question. I certainly think we need to be making more use of the gender pay reporting that happens in the UK. It was suspended last year because of COVID. But I mentioned I only talked about two things on my that I was doing. One of them is also starting to measure that gender pay gap. Certainly there should be parity of pay, absolutely, for anybody doing the same job, whether it's in a band or absolutely the same, but there should be parity pay. That is illegal. So I think my honest answer to that, Yasmin, is I don't think we should be rewarding companies for doing the right thing. I think we should be identifying companies that perhaps need a little bit of help to do the right thing, and the gender pay gap reporting starts to that demonstrates where women are at the organization. We should also be actually looking at equality of pay. In my organization, that's a no-brainer. I can't imagine why I would pay anybody different. The second part of that, give them opportunities for progression. Everybody should have opportunities for progression. I think what we need to look at is what do different people need differently to help them grab those opportunities. And our world is built for the traditional male working environment, and I think we've got to be much smarter than that these days, and give everybody those opportunities. And women just may need it presented in a different way. They may need different levels of sponsorship by individuals within their organization. And certainly I see it as my job to hold out my hand to the next woman coming through the door and pull them up, but pull everybody up, not just one particular group of people.
Thank you very much, Suzannah. Tanja, any thoughts?
I couldn't agree more. No, Suzannah put it very, very aptly. I think the reward is really in itself, that with helping companies help themselves to open up the workplace for men and women alike, we increase our business's competitiveness, and it becomes a nicer workplace for everyone, and it's better for society. So no extra rewards needed. Our work is reward in itself.
Thank you. The other question that we've received for you is, in both Sweden and the UK, there is a skills shortage in the construction workforce. And how can gender equality initiatives in the sector help to meet the need for more skilled workers in the sector?
Well, it's like I said in my address, 45% of women, 45% of students of higher education in technology are women today, and it would be really silly not to tap into the entire recruitment base instead of just pointing the finger at one part, the men. If we want the best and the brightest to join our industry, then we should have an industry that also welcomes all women.
And to add to what Tanya's just said, we do have skills issues in the UK, and the fact that we don't pull from 50% of our talent pool just seems daft. And I come back to, with the research demonstrated that increasing profit margins, you kind of struggle to understand why any business just isn't looking and saying, how do I do this differently? But I think there's a couple of things. First, we can recruit women. Women are really keen to join our industry. You're starting to look at the courses, you're starting to look at the apprenticeships. Those numbers are increasing. What we then struggle with is actually that job aspect, but also then retaining women in the industry. It is no good recruiting a whole load of fabulous people in our industry if it's not a viable career, because it's ridiculously long hours, or they're traveling 300 miles to get to work, and we don't provide that culture or that environment or that flexibility that not just women need. On our pilot, it was mostly men on the front line who suddenly got there was a whole different way of working. Yeah. And just to finish off there, this isn't just about women, and I think I will keep coming back to that. In the UK, 20,000 young people are on a current construction course. 8,000 of them make it into the industry. We lose about 12,000 every year who just don't make it from a course that they've chosen when they've selected our industry into a job. So we actually have to fix that bit as a priority so we can actually start to meet our skills needs.
I think that's a really important point that you're making, Suzannah. I think the next generation of young people really care about a life-work balance. It's important to them. And if our industry is old-fashioned in that sense, then we won't attract anyone. We're talking about women now because there's an obvious lack of women in our industry, but what we really need to talk about is how do we get the best and the brightest kids overall. And if we can't have a modern workplace where you can actually combine having these wonderful toddlers and teenagers that we survive from day to day with having a great job that you can love and actually have time for, then we're not going to get anywhere.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. The change starts early, I believe. A question about recruiting women in the field from a female recruiter working with the Swedish infrastructure market. And she's asking, what can we as recruiters do to help to get more women into the sector and promote female engineers and workers?
You know what? Everything we've talked about so far is really important issues that you need to put forward. I think that as a professional recruiter, she's probably used to the kind of questions put out there to her. I think one really important aspect is to talk about role models, is to show that you would not be alone entering the workforce as a young woman in this field of expertise, but also talk about great stuff like you actually get really great pay in our industry, especially if you reach up to the managerial sectors. Female bosses in our sector make more than female bosses in almost any other sector in Sweden. Also, it's a really cool job to build Sweden. Without our industry, well, nothing happens in our country.
And Tanja, we are one and the same person, I think.
I love it.
With what we're saying, and it's staggering how alike our two nations are. So I think first of all, it's making it really clear to young people and women what careers we have in construction. We make it really complicated. I've got a 16-year-old daughter who's been ingrained in engineering. That's my background, who came home the other day and she said, "You bang on about engineering, Mum." She said, "Nobody in my school year knows what an engineer does." So we've actually got to really look at how we present ourselves, because I'm with Tanja. Engineering, building stuff, and it doesn't matter whether you're the individual that lays the bricks, puts the scaffolding up, designs it, or actually oversees it, or the client who buys it. It's a fascinating industry to be in. You are creating the homes, the schools, the roads. You can't flush the toilet without engineering and construction, is what I always say. So there's a job for everybody. Role models is really key. You can't be somebody if you can't see them. So I think highlighting women at all levels, it doesn't matter whether they're at the top of their game or they're beavering away doing something in a back office. It's actually showing young women that there are people like them in this industry. But again, it's no good doing all of that if when they enter the industry, we let them down because of the way we talk to them, because picking up Yasmin's question, because of the way they're paid, because of the way they're treated. And my point, which was a really simple one, if you give them clothes that make them feel unattractive, horrible, unself-confident, not sure that's even a word, it's no good us bringing all these fabulous women. I know I can go to a girls' school and at the end of it we'll have a queue of young women saying, "That sounds really interesting." I've then got to take them in. And my last point is for women, sponsorship is really, really important. Don't bring them in and let them find their own way. Every woman in your company should have a sponsor at a more senior level who is there to talk to them. And we've just started a fantastic mentoring circle here in England by a lady called Vanessa Murray of Stanhope. And my dream is that every young person, starting with every young woman, comes into our industry and another woman says, "I'm your sponsor, how can I help?" That would be my ultimate dream. And Tanja, I'm happy to share how we're doing that with you over in Sweden, because the response is awesome. It's been fantastic.
Sounds amazing.
Given that both of you have mentioned the importance of role models, who was your greatest role model to the date in your career?
Oh, you know what? There's so many. I am so proud, having worked 20 years in politics. I've had the amazing luck to work for some of the best female Swedish politicians. And one of them is my boss today, our CEO, Katarina. And the great thing about them is that there's never been any discussion that they should or should not be in the positions they're in because they're women. They just are. They walk into a room and they take over and they amaze everyone with their competence. And that's something that's really helped me. It showed me that I can actually do pretty much what I want, because there's other people out there just like me. And it's nothing strange to strive for excellence or to want to better oneself.
And it's interesting because when I started as a young engineer many, many years ago, I don't recall seeing any women in construction. I may be wrong on that, but my role models or the people who inspired me, first of all, I have to say my father. I went home from school one day saying, I think I'd quite like to work in construction. And he did not bat an eyelid and said, right, let's go and have a look and see what's in that. And I think sometimes that's just what you need, who somebody says, you can do this. And then my bosses throughout have all been that sponsor role. So sometimes I don't think a role model has to be somebody particularly special. It has to be somebody that just shows you what can be done and is your number one fan, which is definitely my dad is my number one fan. And I think now I have role models still working with people like Dame Judith Hackett in the UK, and I would say my team. My number two is a lady called Jo Fortley. And she's pretty inspirational and keeps me on track. And I think role models don't necessarily have to be somebody out of reach. They can be somebody who you sit there and say, I'd like to do what they do. How do I do it?
Yeah. I think you're my new role model, Suzannah.
I think you might be mine.
Amazing.
That's so beautiful and inspiring to hear. We have some more industry-focused questions here coming from the public. Is there a difference in type and funding and size and the prestige of the projects run by men and women? Like it happens sometimes in the architecture and design, where men are being commissioned bigger infrastructure projects while women would focus more on building actual buildings or offices or schools. Is this happening in construction as well?
I don't see it from my perspective, but I have been really fortunate in being introduced to women who are the chief managers of huge engineering projects. I certainly hope it isn't that way because, again, like we talked about, there are so many women out there at high level within the education of the industry, of the innovation and technology industry. I think that would mean that we were missing out, but that is not my experience. And if so, I would quote Suzannah again, sort it now.
So is that going to become your new watchword?
It already is. It already is.
Do you know, Monica, I'm not sure I could comment on that. I think like Tanja, I see amazing women in great positions. I think the challenge is those women stand out because there are so few of them, and we just need more of them so it doesn't become a thing. Recently, I saw in the UK construction press, there is a project and the whole team is composed of women, and it will be really interesting if you could do, and it's difficult in construction because no project is the same, but start to look at is what the environment was like on that site, how many disputes did they have, how did they resolve it, it would be really, really interesting to see if those different styles. Again, you come back to that diversity is key, so all women is great, but you then don't have the diversity. It's finding that sweet spot when we're all playing to our strengths.
Thank you for your answers. Going to the gender pay gap, this will always be an issue if there are less opportunities at senior levels. Should we be shifting the dial more radically by forcing organizations to include a percentage of women at board level? And if yes, how can we do that?
That's a really interesting and really tough question. And I've got to tell you that in my youth, I've always been a radical feminist. When I was radicaler, I was all for female quotas on boards because I thought, why the hell doesn't the balance change? Are we doomed to have all men board of directors forever? But I really don't think so, because as I grew older, I realized I don't want to be the one who got my job because I'm a woman. I want to be the one who got my job because I'm the best at it. So no, I don't think forcing organizations to have a certain percentage of women is the right way to go. With the pay gap, that's something different in Sweden, where we have a parts-based model for settling salaries. And it's also legally really important that you don't pay men and women differently. But having a certain number of women at the higher levels in any company is an important symbol. And so I'm all for it, but not forcing.
And I would agree. And I know there's people feel very differently. Some people would say that, well, you need a target to drive that change. So there are positive signs of it, but I also think there's negative signs of it. And it's really frustrating as a woman, because no woman wants to be thought as a target. But if that's the only way I'm going to get at the top table, then do we need it? And I think everybody pivots between the two. I think we have to do things differently. I think we have to just start calling out behavior. When I walk in and there's a room full of men, I have to sit there and go, really, is this the best we could do? Could you not find any women? Did you not look? What do we need to do differently? You need that pipeline. You can't just take women and put, because then it's not fair on them either, because if you're promoting somebody above their experience and knowledge, then we don't get the best out of people. So we have to look at what we do differently. The one thing on targets, I get really, really frustrated when somebody says, oh, we need a woman on a panel, can you speak? No, I can't, thank you very much. There is nothing more frustrating. If the 4 best speakers on that subject are men, so be it. But then we have to say, come on guys, why is that? What are we doing wrong that we haven't got a plethora of women that we can actually call on, and it becomes instinctive that we've got a list of names, and actually there's just fantastic people on it, and it's a really good blend of men, women, ethnicity, sexuality, all of that. That would be my dream. So no targets, I think, was the answer from us both, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to tie into something you said, that it's with panels as with boards of directors. If we look through the old fashioned glasses, then maybe we can only find men. But if we broaden our recruitment base and start forcing ourselves to think differently, then maybe we'll see that there's a plethora of people out there who can actually speak to a subject or get a job done regardless of sex. So all of us, like you said, Suzannah, in your speech, all of us need to kind of force our brains to think differently and more broadly.
Yes, when it comes to the business culture of the construction industry, many people would argue that this is a man's world more than other industries, and that it's an industry that's very suitable for men due to them being physically stronger than women. Do you believe that men would do better in physical jobs in the construction industry than women? And if yes, how is this impacted by the digitalization and the use of technology on the field work?
I think that question just answered itself. Back in the day where you had a chisel and a stone, maybe it was better to be a man. But also, strength isn't always the way to use that chisel on that stone. You also need brains. Women have brains too. So no, I think with increasing importance of technology, digitalization, AI, this kind of erases any physical barriers between men and women. Construction will need all kinds of skills.
And I'd support everything Tanja says. And just to add to that, some of this is about opportunity. There are going to be jobs that men would prefer. Some of them it is more physical. Maybe it just ticks their box a bit more. But if you are a woman and want to do that job, then oh my goodness, you should be able to do that job. So I think it's the right blend. We're honestly, I don't think in some roles ever going to get 50% women, 50% men, because a lot of women wouldn't want to do that or would prefer to do a different job, or their skill set lies elsewhere. But what we shouldn't do is stop anybody who wants to do that. And I think there's a whole blend, and it's about the right skills for the right job at the right time. And yet modern methods of construction, the way the world is turning, there's going to be so many other opportunities which are open to absolutely everybody.
I love that. Hallelujah to letting people do what they want to do.
Yes, and another question is, how do we get men involved into the conversation? Because there's no way that we can reach gender equality if we just leave the other half of the population outside this conversation. It's only us women talking about this. How do we loop in men in this conversation, and how do we make them aware that this is a real issue?
I think that's a great question, Angela. And I think it's about having conversations like these and just saying to them, really? I also think women and men sometimes don't quite know what the right thing is to do. They'll say, well, I'll set a target, and we go, we don't want that either. And they go, oh my goodness. So we actually have to sit down and say, what will make the difference? What is stopping women? So our flexible working debate was really, really interesting on our pilot project. 18 months ago, I think everybody would have said, yeah, we'd like to do that. Now men are saying, oh my goodness, there's a prize in this for me as well. What do I need to do differently? So women have to be champions of that diversity, and actually sometimes just ask and say, I'd really like to change this. What is it that I need to do? And I think we need to have also grown-up conversations sometimes when men say things that they don't quite realize the impact they have. Women are less confident in the workplace. How do we actually help men by saying to them, when you say that, you don't think you're saying anything? That individual probably took that quite personally. And how do we just change the narrative that we're all much more comfortable saying, do you know what, I really don't like it when you say that to me. I can do that in my position if somebody says something, but it's still quite nerve-wracking for me to say, do you know what, that was a bit rude, or I didn't really like that, or that made me feel really bad. So for somebody junior, it's really difficult. We all need to say, do you know what, I don't think you should be saying that anymore. Or do you know the way you did that meant that that woman will now not come back, and you're the person who wants to make it different. So come back to what I said in my presentation. It's up to everybody. What are they going to do differently if they really want to change the industry?
Absolutely true. I couldn't agree more. And what makes me so proud is in our work with Big Företagen, we have been joined by the often male CEOs of many of our member companies who really want to be part of this work. And we have done movies, and we have had panels where men actually partake in this discussion that we're having, Suzannah and I, right now, making it completely normal for men and women to talk about closing the gender gap within the construction industry. And I'm also really happy to say that we have the collaboration with the unions in this aspect, addressing the macho culture. Because coming back to what you were talking about, Suzannah, about culture that makes women feel uncomfortable in the workplace, this macho culture makes a lot of men uncomfortable as well, because all men can't live up to that troglodyte image that we sometimes talk about. And so addressing these issues will actually aid men as well, and make them part of this discussion.
As we were mentioning before, the change starts really, really early. If you were to meet the young Tanja and the young Suzannah in their 20s, what would you tell them right now?
Don't change. That's what I would say. I've spent so many years trying to adapt, because I was always really loud. I walk into a room and I take over. I'm sorry to say if you didn't notice already. Also thanks to my dad, always thought that I could do and be whatever I wanted. But then as I grew older and became a teenager, kind of backing down, because I got this notion that that's not how real girls act. So I would tell me, don't change, just carry on, be proud, do what you want, and also get a sponsor.
I think there's probably some little bits that I would say, oh, can I just erase that little bit? But overall, I think I'm not telling you what those are, not on screen anyway. I think it would be that you'll be all right. But I think part of what makes you get to where you are is sometimes you have to go through the embarrassing moments, the bit where you drop the ball, the bit where you learn more from your mistakes than getting it right. So you almost don't want to undo that. You have to go through that. And it's a really good question, because I've got a 16-year-old teenage daughter, and you're trying so hard to set that path but not stop them going through that learning experience. So I think you come back to they need somebody to be their number one fan, and just pour love, support, and be there for them. They need somebody in their life to do that. And I think I would say to every father, every mother, somebody in your family needs to be that for young women going forward. I had that. I was really, really lucky, and I think it contributed massively to what I do now. But yeah, you'll be all right. Keep going, girl, is probably what I'd tell myself.
I think these are really good advices to take at any age, to be very honest, both as a young professional, but also later on in your life. Suzannah, Tanja, thank you both for your fantastic speeches. I believe that change starts with each and any one of us, with our actions within our close circles, our communities, and our organizations. And I think you both have contributed greatly to spreading awareness and understanding about why should we strive for a gender equal construction industry. We will now take a short break, so feel free to go and grab a cup of coffee and join us for the next session on driving inclusion from the top, implementing the business case of equality in the world of construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.